One of the longest tenured arts leaders in Winnipeg has begun a new chapter. Stephen Borys served as the director and CEO of the Winnipeg Art Gallery Qaumajuq for 17 years until announcing his departure last month to begin a new venture. That venture is called Civic Muse, a consultancy group that advocates for arts and cultural institutions as catalysts for equitable changes in society as a whole. Stephen joins us in the Classic 107 studios to tell us more about Civic Muse. Nice to see you.
Hi, Nolan. Nice to see you.
So I want to go back to that moment when you made the announcement that you're stepping aside as the leader of the WAG-Qaumajuq. What did that moment feel like for you?
You know, looking back, as opposed to that week, all I know is that I really wanted to launch something important. And I thought, why not do it at the same time? So I haven't had a lot of time to reflect on those 17 years yet, because I quickly shifted gears to launch Civic Muse. It was planned that way, but are now just starting to think about what those years were about.
How, as you're starting to think about that and your experience at the Winnipeg Art Gallery Qaumajuq doing a whole raft of things, but perhaps most notably the inception and the continuation of Qaumajuq, this incredible collection of Inuit art. What sorts of things will you take away from that experience into this next venture as you begin to think on it?
In a way, for me, it was really the most logical evolution of my work as a museum director, an art historian, a curator, a community leader. And what I mean by that is much of what I've been doing as a museum director, as a curator, even at the WAG and Qaumajuq, I will continue doing, but will have the opportunity and really the incredible fortune of picking clients, partners, stakeholders that I would like to work with to further a very specific project. That for me is a gift, and it's incredibly exciting.
So as you're putting together the idea of Civic Muse in your brain, first of all, where does that idea come from that you're thinking, you know what, I need to start something a little bit different. I want to, as you say, be a bit more curatorial, perhaps, of the people that I get to work with. What did those sort of first inclinations of what Civic Muse look like to you?
Firstly, I like where you're going with this, because this is precisely my thinking in terms of taking what I've learned, what I've been gifted, whether it was with a fundraising project, a building project, equity, indigenization, decolonization, partnerships, all those things, taking that and saying, you know what, we could apply these to other situations, other organizations, other sectors. For instance, as we worked through the building of Qaumajuq at the WAG and really responding specifically to the TRC calls to action, it helped me understand what a new museum could look like, what a new business plan could look like. I've learned these things, and I really want to share them, and I want to give back. I'd like to help larger, smaller organizations, academic institutions, businesses, because many of the things we did at the WAG are not exclusive to an art museum.
It's quite a broad way of thinking to be able to take that experience. There are not too many of these sort of arts curatorial jobs out there in Canada, but then to think, how do I apply this more broadly to social enterprises as a whole? As you're trying to put together Civic Muse in its sort of early iterations and you're having conversations about it, what were some of the reactions that you were getting from people who were working maybe in other sorts of fields about the ways in which you would like to apply those things that you had learned over all of your decades of experience to a wide range of other ventures?
I think back to that first week after the announcement went out. I remember having a conversation with Paul Simin at the Free Press. But in that first week, I would say, beyond the amazing words of support and gratitude that came through, I had conversations with a range of business leaders, university deans, collectors, school principals, other museum leaders about, hey, that thing you did at the WAG, how did it work? Can you walk me through it? Or how did you incorporate equity into the WAG? And some of those conversations came from organizations well outside of the cultural sector, which told me the power of art, the power of culture as expression, as a way to communicate, to inform, to bring people together, can be applied in so many different ways today. And I would say more than ever, art museums are being called upon. They become centers for dialogue, for protest. Why not take that and help the community? And by helping it, how can we make it better?
This is maybe a part of this larger conversation that we're having in society right now with the dawn of forces outside of the creative realm that would maybe try to devalue creativity. What is the role that art has in society to better it in 2025? How much of that sort of debate that we're having maybe influenced your desire to say, you know what, I've got an answer for this, and I'd love to show you?
Well, the questions you just posed, Nolan, are precisely the questions that have fueled my desire to launch Civic Muse. And we know that art in whatever form, be it a composition, be it a painting, be it an installation, sculpture, is one of the most powerful and universal ways to communicate ideas without having a formal language or vocabulary. So we know that. When you bring a group of grade 3 kids into the WAG or any museum, you don't have to have a large didactic on the wall for them to understand a painting a lot of the times. If you could take that and maybe use it in a way to reconcile, to help others understand, or to rethink a perspective they've had. And more I find art has become an incredible tool. And art, I'm just saying that in a very broad way.
Yeah,
it could be a work, it could be a poem, it could be a novel. But I'm amazed by how many people have something to say about culture. And that tells you it's a very powerful commodity.
Yeah. The name of this venture is a very compelling and captivating one. Maybe you can tell us a bit about why you chose the name Civic Muse and what you hope that it signifies in the early days of this organization.
No one asked me that. I love this question. I can tell you precisely. I took a bike ride with my wife to the Forks. We're sitting and having a beer, and we're talking about, as you look at securing a website, a business name, and you go through all the incorporation. And
Sure.
we looked at names. The two ideas for me, Civic and Muse. I live in an amazing city. I think of art museums situated within our cities and the role they play. Muse, in terms of museology, in terms of someone that guides through art or culture, in terms of the classical way. Those two ideas were exciting, how we can even incorporate art into our daily lives, into the fabric of our cities. It seemed like a perfect blend, and frankly, the website was available, the business was available, so I quickly snapped it up.
Fantastic. The pragmatic and also the poetic coming together, and perhaps a more perfect blend for what you are attempting here for a name I certainly could not think of. As you begin this venture in earnest, what are the sorts of conversations that you're hoping to have with different social enterprises, with different business leaders that maybe you haven't had the chance to have yet because you've been involved so deeply on this sort of curatorial side of producing exhibits and things for people to interact with? But now as you're heading into I would even say a larger scale place with you're now in the economy of ideas, perhaps more so than you have been previously. What sorts of conversations are you hoping now to have?
Well, beyond the economy of ideas, the economies of taste, culture.
Yeah, sure.
I would say that the most exciting thing for me, there's something liberating of moving outside of a very specific office and organization.
Right.
But taking that and say, how would that apply to a university? Or the curriculum right now at a school of art? Because I also teach at both universities, University of Manitoba and U of W, on the idea of the museum, I'm constantly looking at new templates for how we do things. And so, for instance, the business plan for a museum, that's a very specific thing. Organizational charts. What does the hierarchy look like within the museum today?
Sure.
I've had conversations with news organizations in terms of how do you truly incorporate equity into a hierarchy. I've had a number of conversations with academics, business leaders, in terms of can we talk about equitable solutions today in the city? There will be those hardcore art projects that I'd love to do, whether it's exhibitions, writing, lecturing. That'll continue. But I'm also thinking about responsibilities of the role of art in our society and our communities today to particularly help those who haven't had the opportunities to access the same art that I had.
At the same time that you are now involved in your own venture, less specific than it would be to be the leader of something like the Winnipeg Art Gallery, I would imagine also that sort of blank canvas, if you'll pardon the metaphor here, would be a rather daunting one. What's that been like?
It is. I've largely always had an employer. But interestingly, a lot of my colleagues who have moved from, say, a museum, a gallery, university, into a consultancy or something, they have just opened the doors, opened my mind in terms of what we can actually do. I think there's going to be a long runway in terms of understanding what kind of pace I want to go at. But the opportunity to pick the projects I really wanted to work on. I've had conversations with the government of Nunavut of significant projects. How can I apply what I did with Qaumajuq to another territory, to another place? I'm really excited about dialogue with First Nations and Métis in our city, projects that are going on. And I find they will come, some will come to my door, others I will seek out. But I think it's going to be a balance of finding that.
So when we talk again in 5 years about Civic Muse, what type of projects will you hope to have to be able to say, yeah, this is my new Qaumajuq, maybe? What's that project that you're hoping that you can accomplish in this forum that maybe you wouldn't have been able to achieve in others?
Well,
I like the smile.
I have to admit, I love our bricks and mortar projects. I actually love coming up with value propositions and case for support for building projects, campaigns. That's exciting. I like to be able to help organizations understand what a vision, what a purpose truly is, whether the end result is to raise money or to increase visitorship or engagement. But ultimately, I will say this, and I mean this seriously, beyond raising money, building, creating assets and stuff like that, if I can raise the profile of the word culture in our community, if it's on more people's lips in terms of their daily life, whether it's an exhibition, whether it's a concert, whether it's a community event, if I can do that and support that, and if I can ensure that leaders, whether they be appointed, elected, or in the private sector, are talking about culture, it tells me maybe I can help. Maybe I've helped.
What sorts of things can Winnipeggers expect to see from Civic Muse in the next in the next, maybe we've talked about the 5-year question. What can they expect to see in the short term?
Well, in the short term, the most exciting thing I'm doing, and I love the summers for this, I've been writing, I've been blogging, some podcasts will come up. I will kind of share my thinking, and getting that out has been really exciting in terms of not just through social media platforms, but also we'll be hosting events at Phillips Square, which is our residence, which is a restored historical church. We'll have opportunities to bring together different cultural leaders in terms of having conversations about what does culture mean today for you. And I would like to think that much of this will be focused on Winnipeg, but I do know there will be projects east and west that will allow me to spread out some of the good that's happening within our own city.
This is all incredibly exciting to hear about and to engage with, and we can't wait to see where this goes, no matter where it goes. We will link to some of the things that you just talked about, Stephen, at Civic Muse, some of the musings and blog posts that you've already shared. We'll link to those at our website, classic107.com, and the Classic 107 app. I feel as though we could talk for quite a long time here, but perhaps we'll portion it out over the coming months for now to say it's so exciting to see what you're up to, Stephen, and congratulations.
Thank you.